So this is the second of our hospitality seminars, and the reason for that is that the hospitality sector, amongst others, has been one of the hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic, and in many cases that still continues, especially in houses and premises where even the 1 metre plus rule is impossible to enforce, and where to reopen would not be economically viable. I think it's quite a challenge for houses that can accommodate the 1 metre plus, but for those smaller, more intimate pubs that we've all come to grow and love, obviously it's a real challenge for people like that. So as part of the SK Business Recovery work in Stockport, we wanted to have a discussion with invited guests where we can explore and discuss issues that include things like adapting to the new regulations. So what has been the impact, both positive and negative, in the way that we've had to, the hospitality sector especially, has had to change the way that it operates on a daily basis. We're really pleased to be able to welcome today James and Vicky Almond, represented from Almond Family Pubs in Stockport, Jennifer Connolly, who is Acting Director of Public Health at Stockport Council, Martin Healy. Welcome, Martin. I think you're new to our group. Owner of the Good Rebel in Stockport Town Centre and very experienced within this particular hospitality trade. And Ian O'Donnell, who is Head of Public Protection at Place Directorate at Stockport Council. So I'd like to invite each of the panel just to introduce themselves and maybe the role that they play, either indirectly or directly within the hospitality sector. So I'll start with what I can see on my screen. So can I start with you, Ian, please?
Yes, I'm Ian O'Donnell, Head of Public Protection at Stockport Council. We've been heavily involved in the whole COVID situation in terms of the legislation. My role covers environmental health, trading standards and licensing. And really, since the start of the outbreak, we've been involved in advising places about the various pieces of legislation that have come in, starting off with what businesses can and can't open at the start of lockdown, then moving through the opening of it. So we've been looking at it from a health and safety point of view, food safety, and I think our job has primarily been to try to help, advise and guide businesses through what they need to do, but equally to deal with concerns and complaints that are coming in from the public. I think that's been the biggest challenge, to be honest, and it's something that would be interesting to get the views of the hospitality sector on, about trying to balance those things of measures that help places open, but equally some of the concerns that then come in from residents. Not been helped, to be blunt, by a lot of the confusion that's existed between guidance, legislation, what can I do, what can't I do. So we've been having to do what you guys in hospitality have been doing, which is keeping up, or trying to do our best to keep up with changes in legislation on a very fast, in a very fast moving environment.
Thanks very much for that, Ian. And Jen, can I ask you to just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role?
Hi everyone, thanks for having me today. I'm Jen Connolly, Director of Public Health in Stockport, and so that role is really has been focused on coordinating the response to the pandemic, and with particular consideration for the hospitality sector. I think that's been trying to ensure that, particularly as we're now moving into this current phase of things, making sure that whilst things are being reopened, that the testing and the contact tracing and outbreak response elements of this are really strong, so that we can open things up with as much confidence as possible that we're doing those in the safest possible way. So getting that system right behind the scenes to make sure that you can operate as safely as possible, whilst absolutely understanding how much guidance everyone's having to read, digest and implement. It's there absolutely to make this as safe as possible for everyone. So I'm sure we'll come back on to talk a little bit more about the detail of some of those functions, the testing, the contact tracing and the outbreak management, but that's how my role relates in this instance.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Jen. We'll certainly come back to you. We do have some specific questions around all that and why it is important. So yeah, absolutely come back to you. And Martin, welcome. Can I just ask you to introduce yourself, maybe a little bit about your background?
I am Martin Healy, the owner of the Good Rebel in Stockport. I'm the owner, but I'm the hands-on operator, so I'm here every day. You will see me every day running it. Especially important in these times since we opened to make sure everything's being handled spot on. My background, previous 5 years, I was working for Turtle Bay, running a flagship store in town in Manchester Oxford Street, and prior to that, I had 10 years in Slug and Lettuce, running several sites across the north of England.
Hi, James and Vicky. Would you just like to introduce yourselves and just tell the audience who you are and what you do and where you've come from?
Hi, Helen. We're James and Vicky Almond, brother and sister, from the Almond Pubs family. We've got 6 pubs in the Stockport area. Well, I tell a lie, 6. One is just in Thameside, but we still consider it Stockport, and have done as a family for some time now. Our other director partner, Doug Almond, our dad, isn't with us today, but is much involved in the business. So there's 3 of us running 6 quite well-known pubs in the Stockport area.
Okay, so I'd like to, again, I'm just going to go back to Jennifer maybe, because I do think this is really important. The current position in Stockport, can you just explain how that maybe fits in with the whole of the GM situation?
Certainly. So in Stockport this week, our rates per 100,000 are around 25 per 100,000. That does fluctuate daily. That because of the numbers of cases that we see on a daily basis. So that's risen from, we were much lower sort of early July time. We were seeing sort of fewer than 5 cases a day in Stockport, and now that rate takes us up to seeing around, on average, about 10 or 11 cases a day in Stockport. Nationally, the rate per 100,000 is around 10 per 100,000, sorry. But in Greater Manchester, that rate is much higher across the board. So we are part of that higher rate across Greater Manchester. There's obviously variation between the boroughs in Greater Manchester. Wigan's probably the lowest, and again I'll have to check their daily numbers, but I think that the last time I saw they were in around 7 or 8 per 100,000, and then you've got places like Oldham that most recently have been really a lot higher, sort of nudging 100 per 100,000. So there's a few different drivers to that. There's the general community transmission, and then there's also setting-specific outbreaks. And every area is seeing some setting-specific outbreaks. Those settings could be care homes, they could be schools or nursery. I mean, it's less likely to be schools at the moment, but they could be hospitality venues, they could be workplaces. And then, as well as that, we are also all seeing some general community transmission, and that's slightly different between each area, how that community, the sort of main drivers to that community transmission, and the demographics and the geographies involved in each borough vary sort of slightly as well. So we are sort of looking at that as a whole and seeing some of the common themes there. And what led to the introduction of the additional restrictions by the Secretary of State 2 weeks ago was seeing that a lot of that background community transmission was occurring where households were getting together socially. So the most common driver is actually within a household, further cases arising from somebody picking up the infection, then going home to isolate as part of their household, and the rest of their household then becoming infected. And then what we saw in the data was that the second highest driver to that was then other households coming together. So that's why the restrictions on the social interactions between households was introduced. I think the other driver is just that everybody's out a bit more. There's a lot more social activity, whether that be in hospitality venues or in households, that everybody's having more and more interactions, whether that be getting back into the workplace, for example. So we do know that is happening because of the more mixing of people. But I think what what has been tried to be done through the particular measures is looking at where the most common follow-up cases have been and try and put the restrictions in place there. For Stockport, I think the other driver that we have talked about previously and we've focused a lot of energies on is that sort of slightly younger adult population, and we completely recognise that population, younger adults have, along with everybody, this has been a really hard time and everybody's keen to get back out socialising again, and we fully understand that. I think what we're trying to say is that we need to all be doing this in the safest possible way, and one of the key one of the key measures in all of this is that social distancing. I know we'll come on to that, I assume, a little bit more about distances and 2 metres, 1 metre, and I've done a video previously that sort of talked about the science and the policy behind that. But I think just if we go back to basics for a minute, it helps answer some follow-up questions. This is a virus that is spread predominantly through droplet transmission and also through touching surfaces that may have had somebody's droplets transmitted onto them. So that's why the distancing of 2 metres is one of the key preventative measures, one of the key safety measures. As you get closer to people, you're more likely to pick up their droplets, essentially. And also that's why hand washing and cleaning regimes are so important, because that's how the virus is spread. We know that for a lot of people, that virus the impact of that virus on their health might be fairly minimal. But as it's spread around and in the community, as more of it is circulating and there are more and more interactions where that is then transmitted, there is more and more likelihood that will get to somebody who is vulnerable to the virus. So that's why it's important that no matter what the impact on us personally might be, why it's really important that we all help to reduce that spread.
That's super. Thanks very much, Jen. That's given us a really great grounding and hopefully covered off some understanding. As you say, we have got some more sort of detailed questions to come back to you on. I think if I can go to Martin now. Martin, as far as your trade is concerned, have you witnessed a significant increase in trade Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday over that period since the introduction of the Eat Out to Help Out scheme? I
don't trade Monday to Wednesday at the moment. I'm on reduced hours.
Okay.
Since we've reopened, but what I have noticed is a drop-off on Thursday because there seems to be a big, massive footfall Monday to Wednesday, and Thursday is like the new Sunday or Monday in the week, basically. And I'm speaking to a few of my friends who run venues in the city centre, and it's very much the same as well. That Monday to Wednesday is your new Saturday, and so Thursday is quiet. Friday slightly picks up, and Saturday seems to be unaffected still.
From your perspective, Ian, talking to people within your contacts, what are they reporting in terms of the positives that have come out of the current situation? I'm particularly talking about things like tables and chairs on streets are being relaxed, so they've been able to extend their sort of the pavement culture, those kind of things. Have they reported back to you on any of those?
Yes, people have welcomed that. I think it's been a fairly complicated situation at times, because the initial talk from government was that on the 4th of July, pubs and restaurants will be able to open outdoors. So there was a big rush for places to try and get outdoor seating who didn't have it previously. When the guidance and legislation came out, it did allow places to trade indoors as well, which was welcome, because I think some places wanted that choice, if you like. It didn't want to be outdoors only. So some of the feedback that we've had is where places can do that, they've seen that as a good opportunity. It gives people, and it gives the public, and it gives customers a choice, because I think one of the things that, going back to some of the comments that Jen's made, we're in the throes of a pandemic. A lot of people are concerned. And I think if they have the option of sitting outside, some people will choose to do that, obviously as long as the weather's okay. It is a bit more challenging for some places, particularly in and around some of the tighter streets around the Stockport town centre, where accommodating tables and chairs isn't always as easy because of the width of pavement, but certainly our highways team have been doing what they can to do things like use up parking bays and potentially identify areas that people could use as communal trading areas. I think we're keeping a watching eye on that. The view from so far is that places are okay trading with what they've got. I know Manchester have got some dedicated areas they've put aside. It's not something that we've done in Stockport. There were some discussions about that happening. I think we'll be guided by comments from the hospitality trade about what they want. It's a big part of what we've tried to do, is to try to talk to people throughout this rather than just impose things from a council point of view. We've really tried to work with businesses to say, look, what works for you? We've got to try and be as flexible as we can. So I think that's one of the changes I've seen, that people wanting to trade outside, we'll enable that wherever we can.
Okay, thank you. And just following on for that, how well prepared generally were premises when they were given the news that they could reopen back in July?
Pretty good, really. I think, as I say, I think being allowed to open indoors as well as outdoors was a huge relief. I think there've been some fairly strong representations nationally that just outdoors only would be very, very restrictive, and a lot of businesses just wouldn't be viable. So places, that was a relief. Places were good with that. We've done some visits. As I say, we're getting complaints that we're following up, and we did a weekend where we did a lot of visits with the police. And the view was that the vast majority of places were doing what they could. But some of the difficulties weren't with the premises, it was with people, to be honest. The places saying, look, we've done everything, we've put the floor stickers down, we've put the arrows, we've got the track and trace information, we've got all these things in place, and it works okay until about 10:30, 11 o'clock. Once people have had a bit to drink, then some of those inhibitions just go. And that's when certainly people in the hospitality trade have been in some fairly difficult positions. So if you've got a pub or a bar, a restaurant full of people, and people are not doing what they should be doing. So I think that it's a twin track approach. Clearly there's legislation and guidance that people should follow, but equally there's a big responsibility on the public to do the right thing for the reasons that Jen outlined at the start. This is not just sort of rules and regulations for the sake of it. There's a massive pandemic that's going on that we can all help and all help deal with.
Just thanks, Ian. Just going back to Jen on that particular point, I think it would be quite useful, Jen, if you wouldn't mind, just to explain how the track and trace system operates and how it can control outbreaks of coronavirus happening more generally across Stockport.
Sure. So there's a couple of bits to that. The fundamental thing that contact tracing program is trying to do is separate infectious people, or people who are very likely to become infectious soon, from non-infectious and from the rest of us. So we're trying to make that to separate those two populations. Through the height of the pandemic, there was so many people who were likely to be either infectious or had been recently infected, that we all had to essentially be kept apart from each other. As the incidence has dropped, as the number of cases have dropped, we've been allowed to start to mingle and socialise and interact a little bit more. But what a contact tracing system does is, first you want to be getting anybody who's symptomatic tested, because you want to find out who's infectious. And the most, whilst there's some asymptomatic transmission, I'll come on to that a little bit later, the most likely to be infectious are those people who've got some symptoms, even if those are really mild. And I really want to stress that. We're hearing about circumstances where people are feeling a little bit under the weather, but not necessarily thinking it warrants isolation and get a test. And I really would encourage people to do that at the moment. We've got to have quite a high threshold for suspicion, and quite a low threshold for suspicion, and be quite open to actually probably best that I just keep myself away for a day, get the test done, and then if it does come back negative, carry on, but have that high degree of suspicion that, okay, maybe this is worth getting checked out. So you first and foremost is you're trying to get people tested, so you know who those people who are carrying the virus, who those people are. When they're tested and confirmed as a positive case, they're then contacted by the NHS Test and Trace service, and they will be asked about where have they been in the 2 days prior to either becoming symptomatic, starting with the symptoms, or in the 2 days prior to when their test was done, if they don't really have any symptoms. In those 2 days, and for the 7 days following your positive test result, that's probably when you're most infectious. So that's why, and it can go on up to about 9 days, that's why the advice is that you must, as a positive case, you must isolate for 10 days. You're most likely to have also had, you're very highly likely to have had contact with those people in your household as well. So that's why they must then also start isolation for 14 days. And the 14 days timescale there is to allow for the incubation period of the virus. And so that's at the time when you've been exposed to the virus, it might be kind of hibernating in your body, and then within a few days you may then start to actually feel symptoms yourself. We want those people isolated at the time they become infectious, because as I said just a minute ago, we're looking back a couple of days. We want people out of circulation essentially at the time when they become infectious, and that can be before they show symptoms. So that's why the isolation periods are slightly different. Once you've been confirmed as a case, it's isolate for 10 days. As a contact, as a close contact, it's isolate for 14 days. So just going back to the contact tracing, once you've been confirmed as a case, you'll be contacted and somebody will go through with you. This can be done online or with a phone call. Where have you been in the last couple of days, and who have you had close contact with? And when we say close contact, we mean with any face-to-face contact where that's within a metre. So any face-to-face contact for pretty much any period of time, you're a close contact. If it's been contact that's within 2 metres but greater than 1, so within 2 metres for 15 minutes or more, or for anybody where you've shared a car because, without a bulkhead, so any car travel together. Those are the people who you're most likely to have exposed, essentially, and therefore we ask those people to isolate as contacts. So once the test and trace service have got the information from that case, they then follow up their contacts and ask them to isolate for 2 weeks. Now we know that's a big challenge. Everyone's been through the full lockdown and just getting used to maybe doing a little bit of out and about a bit more, and now you've been asked to go back into isolation for 2 weeks, and you probably, at least at the start, you're probably feeling absolutely fine. That's a big challenge, a big ask, but it's the key step in how we then protect society, protect everybody else from the onward spread. So that's how we break the chain, essentially. So that's sort of a contact tracing and how it works. In terms of the outbreak management, if we identify a setting where there are maybe 2 cases that relate to a particular setting, and we link those by time and place to deem it an outbreak. So it's not just you've had 2 cases at any period of time, but within a 14-day period of 2 cases occurred, whether that be in staff or say staff and a customer, or 2 customers at the same venue, where we think there might be a hypothetical chance that there's been a link, there's been some transmission within that setting. And in those situations, that's when we deem it an outbreak. So outbreak often feels a bit big and scary, but outbreak can just be 2 cases in some circumstances. And in those cases, we do a full risk assessment with that setting to understand how stringent your COVID secure methods are, how strict those are being applied, how strictly those are being applied, how well people are adhering to them, what the kind of interactions between staff are. Are they really strict on their distancing, or are there some areas where that's a bit more lapse, and where there are more lapses in that? I think it's trying to understand your settings, you know, and where those potential weaknesses may have occurred. And we understand that some of that is out with your control as well, but we need to do that risk assessment to understand who may have been exposed to those cases, and therefore who are the likely close contacts that would then need to be informed to isolate.
So I think everything you've covered there just explains why it's so important for anybody running hospitality premises to make sure that they do register contact names and telephone numbers so that people can be contacted immediately, which will actually surely help, hopefully help the businesses to re-establish themselves and reopen quickly. I know that's happened with a couple of premises already in Stockport, so it's been good to be able to see how, despite the fact that somebody has been contacted as having had the tested positive, the business has still been able to very quickly get back on its feet again. So I don't think, in this case, don't think it's something that anybody should be frightened of doing and contacting and taking details of people who are coming into their premises. Rather, it's an absolute positive to get business back on its feet again. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Right, well, thank you. Thanks for that.
Absolutely. And I think the more clear you are on those processes, the more information, the more you're minimising any potential outbreaks. I think it's understanding that risk of an outbreak will, you know, the risk exists, but the more proactive in the measures and the more detail and information that we've got, the more we can minimise the impact of those outbreaks.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. Martin, can I just ask you a couple of questions really? Overall, how good are your customers, and customers generally speaking to your colleagues, at actually complying with the measures that have been introduced?
Very good, very, very good. I've been quite surprised. There's obviously you get your odd two, more the kind of old school characters, as you'd say, who probably don't quite understand and don't want to play along, but I'd say 99% of the guests who come in here have been absolutely brilliant. Maybe a bit of a reminder every now and then to socially distance or to sit down, but apart from that, it's been great, really positive here.
So I just unmute myself again. And also, can I just ask you, since obviously coronavirus has had, can't escape from it, a devastating impact on many people's lives, many people's businesses. How have things been for you since you've been able to reopen? What have you seen? Are you feeling quite optimistic for the future now?
Very optimistic. I sat down with my accountant last week, and we're kind of just about breaking even at the moment, which is great because that's not what I was expecting. The Saturdays, I've been really kind of surprised at how busy they've been. It's been very, very positive. Luckily, we've done quite a bit of. We was taking advantage of the lockdown, doing cocktail deliveries for the last 2 months of lockdown, and that's kind of helped us bring people in and keep our presence on social media. So when we opened, that first Saturday was absolutely busy. I was so proud of the response of all the kind of community coming in. But it's obviously we're only operating about 25% capacity because we're such a small venue, and it was kind of built for vertical drinking as opposed to horizontal drinking, but basically space for people to stand and drink. But it's been very good so far, and the future I think is looking very rosy. We've come out of the dark side, and I'm very looking forward to seeing how it progresses.
That's fantastic. That's really, really good to hear. That is really positive outcome to hear. And you talked about your cocktail service. Are there any things that you've actually picked up that you've been operating because of the pandemic that you're going to continue with? So what positives might you be taking forward?
Yeah, well, say the cocktail delivery service, I started mainly because I was bored. I wanted something to do, and I cycle everywhere, so it helped me get fit as well. And the sheer amount of people who were taking us up on that, and I've been cycling to Disley and Sale, so I've gone all over, especially up that hill to Disley, has been great. And so we've continued that on, and we still have a nice steady circuit because we built up. It was nice to build regulars in lockdown. So I actually have about 20 new regulars who've never been here before, who I got a chance to go and speak to and, have that interaction on the doorstep while I was dropping off cocktails. Has been very good. And like I said, kind of that side of the business is also running alongside the operating side of the business now, and that it's here to stay. You know, it kind of, the lockdown really had to make us think outside the box. And also, social media is so important, and it was just something, our social media following grew in lockdown because we were talking about the cocktail deliveries every day. There were pictures of me cycling everywhere, looking sweaty with a big backpack on, dropping cocktails off. You know, it's a positive message, and it helps. It actually helped with the reopening of the business because we were active, we were going, we weren't forgotten about, and we had an even bigger audience than when we closed down on the 20th of March, basically.
Ian, one of the things that I know that you've been asked about a lot is, can you just clear up the position about meeting in pubs? It looks like it's okay to meet your parents in a pub but not in their garden. Is this true? And if so, can you just shed some light on why that is?
Yeah, that's one of the things that's come up a lot, particularly following the guidance that came out 2 weeks ago for what was Greater Manchester and what's now the north of England. Just to explain the position here, the track and trace system that's up and running, it's doing a couple of things. It's identifying whether a particular outbreak, how they can be managed. It's also providing a lot of information about how people are becoming infected with COVID. And that's building up a bigger picture. And what that had shown was that the transmission that was most of the concern now was taking place in those home environments or domestic environments. That's what people were telling the track and trace system. So that's what the evidence was showing, rather than transmission within pubs. So I think what the public health and what the government have tried to do is to make a distinction there and say that this really applies to domestic settings because this is what the legislation said. I think the thinking is that with pubs, that with the hospitality trade, those premises should have done at the minimum of full COVID risk assessment and should have measures in place to ensure the sort of social distancing that should keep people safe. So I think the thinking is that because you've got those in place within a pub environment and they should be there, they should be operating, that affords perhaps a degree of protection that people probably don't have in their home. I think the thinking behind it is that people are probably, unfortunately, going to be a little bit more relaxed within that home environment because they're not out and about somewhere. There are not rules that people are complying with. So yeah, it seems an odd situation that you can meet up with your parents in a pub garden, but under the new guidance, you shouldn't meet with them in your own garden. That is what the guidance and legislation says, and that's the explanation and the thinking behind it. Like people looking for a loophole, some people, I don't have to do that. I don't have to give my name because I've seen the guidance and the guidance says it's optional, so I don't have to do this. And the point that Jen Connolly is making is, well, look, this is the reason we're having to do this is because we need to protect ourselves and protect everyone, one another. So yeah, it's not a matter of trying to sort of dodge the legislation. It's let's collectively work together. But yeah, it's
socially and collectively, I'd agree. It is a bit irksome. It is a bit of a nuisance. There are different characters with the track and trace that will use it and that want to use it. We're on it as much as we think we can reasonably be on it. Some see it as an intrusion. And in different groups within our regulars. So if you can imagine your regular guy that comes in, has a few pints early doors, stands with the same crowd, or now sits with the same crowd, I've got to fill that in every night, and it's a bit of a nuisance to him. You get others that perhaps shouldn't be in the pub at that time, wherever they should be. They don't want to fill it in, but then others that are happy to get involved. So we've got a few different ways that you can sign in when you come to the pub. I'll let Vicky explain them technologically, but we wonder if we're doing quite enough. Actually forcing everybody that comes into it causes offence, and I don't think it's quite sustainable for us as a business because it rubs people up the wrong way. Most are happy to play ball and cooperate.
We actually had a social media row when we originally announced our position on the track and trace, and there was a group of people, which I assume were connected but maybe not, that commented on the post to say, so that's another organisation that's jumping on this government nonsense, and track and trace system doesn't work, and it's a failing system, and it's just a way of capturing our data. And there was really quite a strong outpouring and several comments, so much so that we took the post down because it was so divisive. And then I think anecdotally within the pubs and what the managers are telling us, that they've got some people that are upset if they're not asked and some people that are upset if they are asked. So yeah, more and more we're trying to put the onus on the individual, making our signage increasingly obvious that this is how you register. So for us, if you've booked a table, which 9 out of 10 of our diners currently have, they're immediately compliant through our online booking system. And then people that have walked in or just coming for a drink, we've got QR codes on posters and at the entrance, so people can either jump on that way, or they can register at the door if they're not smartphone savvy with the hostess, or they can jump on the Wi-Fi, evolved Wi-Fi, which automatically means we're compliant. So we've made it accessible by 4 different avenues for the guest. But I think it's fair to say we're not forcing it, because when we've had quite a backlash.
Forgive me, Helen, I think I might just preempt your questions on the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. In terms of footfall, a roaring success for us across the pubs. I think in our careers, we've never put a Facebook post out to say, we're fully booked, don't come. If you want to come for a drink, come. But we were in a position last night where all 6 pubs were fully booked with 2 sittings. And it was important to us to honour the promise that we made to the reservations and look after them and not take any further walk-ins, rather than have massive delays on food service and what have you. That's further impacted by just how many bodies you can have in the kitchen and how much you can deliver. But it's really, really driven football. So who'd have thought a tenner would have given people a COVID shield? They seem to think it has, and it's brought them out. And I think I'm confident that we've managed them reasonably safely. The weather's really helped a lot of people with booked tables ate outside.
Yeah.
So you've really, I don't know mathematically, but let's say you've halved the risk of infection if you're outside anyway, haven't you?
Yeah, very much so. Do you feel so far, I mean, it's early days, I know we're sort of probably about only halfway through, if that, on the scheme. Do you feel it's had a negative impact on your weekend trade? So has it affected your Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday trade?
A bit, but not as much as it's made us in the week.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's still been worthwhile. I mean, our weekends were massively impacted by the capacity restrictions and having to space the tables out further, and we lost up to 30% of covers in some of our, well, minimum 20%, maximum 30% of covers. So most of our footfall previously came from a Sunday, with us being a carvery business. We were very reliant on the tables being turned over so many times on a Sunday. So our Sundays were already hugely down post-COVID anyway, so it's hard to draw kind of year-on-year comparisons. We have seen a bit of a dip Thursdays for sure. And then I think Fridays and Saturdays will be very weather dependent. They tend to be a bit more wet-led because people are eating out Monday to Wednesday, so they're drinking out Friday, Saturday, certainly when it's beer garden weather.
Yeah.
What I think for going into August, our objective for this scheme was that we did a good job of increasing customer confidence in coming out, and that it's safe and that we're a safe environment. And that's been, hopefully we've achieved that, but it's been made more difficult than planned just by sheer volume, in that we've been so busy. There's been an element of, trying to minimise the number of people through the door. And I just hope that wouldn't have an effect, on, for example, yesterday was our busiest day, and I think it was exceptional weather as well as being one of the 3 days on the scheme. But it is important collectively for our sector that bringing people out shows them that it is safe to come out, and it does that, ticks that confidence box as well as driving footfall and turnover. Yeah,
well, that's answered 2 things then, isn't it? Because that's what you want to do. You want people to feel confident in being able to come back. At the same time, they're being incentivised through the scheme. Overall, are customers good at complying with the measures that you've introduced to ensure both your staff and your customers are safe?
Yeah, I would say so. I think there's a lot about what James said. It's just common courtesy. When people are in the public, they behave differently because they're more concerned what other people think than about COVID safety in some cases. Probably the most difficult thing for us has been the track and trace, really. And there's a small corner of the community that just don't want to comply with that. But the distancing, the hand sanitising, 2 people in the toilets.
I think the respect really that's given to that, and the gratitude to us for opening, gratitude to the staff for serving, the appreciation that the staff have got a harder job than usual on the whole. But it's difficult to remind yourself of the majority of people that come through your pubs that you've heard not a whisper from, because that's a successful visit. And then on a Monday, you get a clutch of emails from a handful that they're a bit dissatisfied that we've not quite done enough, or the service wasn't great, or you know, it's hard not to look at the imperfections, but really on the whole,
people have been very compliant.
Massive percentages have been compliant, helpful, appreciative, cooperative.
Happy to be out again.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But ours aren't the kind of compliance anyway. So, you know, we don't, as a rule, our staff were quite concerned. We sent a staff survey out before we opened, a digital survey, just to try and gauge what were their biggest concerns and what we would need to address in our risk assessment. And that formed the grounds for our risk assessment, to how we best needed to protect the staff and where they saw the risks. And certainly they saw them in tight spaces behind bars or behind carvery units or in kitchens and whatever. So we put steps in place to help with that. But some were customer behaviour. What happens if a guy's had 6 pints and he starts getting a bit close to me and what have you. But that didn't happen pre-COVID in real life, if you want to call it that. And when we reminded them of that, yeah, of course, it never did. We never did allow that kind of behaviour. So we're lucky in the family nature of our pub. I wouldn't want to be running a party pub or a boozer at the minute, would you?
No, absolutely not.
No. So talking to some other people within your sector, they found that the Eat Out to Help Out scheme has basically sort of given them a levelling throughout the week, whereas it was always slow and then it sort of came up towards the weekend. They generally felt that it's levelled out, but there is some concern as to how September might look. Are you guys optimistic? What do you think about how it might affect your trade moving forward?
I think it's fair to say we're far from optimistic about September, for a number of reasons. Partly because the scheme will end. We expect to see more redundancies in the press as the furlough scheme becomes where you have to contribute more, and we're getting a little bit deeper into the recession. And anecdotally, when we speak to people, there seems to be an awful lot of people that are still on furlough until the kids go back. So hearing that sentence, you know, I've stayed on furlough until the kids return to school. So if all the children do return and people go back to work, we think it'll be a very different world to the one we're in right now.
Yeah. And just moving on from that, what additional support would you like to see going forward? Again, we'll go back to the fact that the hospitality sector has been one of the hardest hit, and it was one of the last to come back into life as we generally know it, and we want to know it moving forward. What would you say? What would you like the government to do to help your sector moving forward?
The rates suspension has been massively helpful. That's been a heated topic in our industry for a long time anyway. The way our industry is valued to pay rates is unusual to any other industry in the country apart from quarrying. It's based on turnover. And our friend and colleague William Robinson has been pushing for that for a long time. It'd be nice to see if rates never came back.
Or if the formula was reconfigured to, at the moment we feel penalised for turnover, for doing well in our businesses, because the more we take, the more the rates go up, rather than it being on square meterage as it would be in a retail space. So yeah, the rates freeze has saved us an awful lot of overheads this year, and we'd need to see the shake up of that going into next year. And then if the VAT I'm sure that would be huge for
again, is that something that you'd like to see continued for the certainly to see out 2020?
Yeah, that would be really helpful. I think the rates would be arguably a bigger help, but then the problem with the rates is that goes to the local council, doesn't it? So the government are going to have to fund that somewhere else to give the council what they were doing. We contribute £360,000 a year in rates across 6 pubs. And it's an awful lot of money. So while that's suspended, that's going to really help in what we're not paying.
The rates help everybody in our led pubs, whereas the VAT only helps those that are selling a lot of food and soft drinks. It doesn't help the boozers. So selfishly, we'd like both. But I think if I was in a wet led pub, then certainly the rates is huge.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Support-wise, it's fair to mention the support we've had from our breweries. So as Vicky said, we've got 3 pubs with local breweries, Stockport, Robinsons, and then others with Green King and Heineken Star pubs. And with no disrespect to the latter 2, Robinsons have really, really led the way. They've been absolutely outstanding in all the support that they've given us. Quick to react and decisive. They have a Robinsons Pub Hub Facebook group, and you'd only need to go on that and see how grateful all their tenants are for the support that they've given us, not just in financial terms, moral support and information. But then all breweries have been very, very good at that. They've been good at sharing information, sending us generic risk assessments, take your pick out of that, read that, this is how we do it, supporting us with printed stationery for
like COVID signage
and that kind of thing. It's been really, really useful. I wonder how the smaller independent operators, maybe in free houses or those little bars, quirky bars in the northern quarter, that don't have big corporate bodies like that supporting them, that don't have those kind of departments to advise them going on, because a lot of the guidelines have been that. They've been guidelines, which has been quite useful because it means you can interpret them as you need to a point. But the smaller firms, how are they supposed to read those? I'm talking about independent sole traders. That's really hard for them to read those. And I think it's probably a bit unfair that Sky just launched a camera into the middle of Manchester, picking on the candidates that were probably likely to fall foul of the lack of clarity in government guidance.
I think maybe there's definitely work to be done to support those very small pubs, small premises, where even 1 metre plus is just it's just unworkable in terms of becoming a financially viable proposition for them. So maybe it's those kind of people as well. But I think that's kind of, if there's anything else you want to add, please feel free to.
I think only to say, if it wasn't for the VAT and the furlough and the government grants and the rates, we simply wouldn't have survived even into middle of August where we are now. I know what you mean about the smaller businesses, but even in we've got bigger pubs with big beer gardens, and they still need to be really busy to make any money. It's there's not an awful lot of profit in pubs, so we needed the help that we've had so far, just simply to survive, let alone go forward.
I think it's really.
We talk about.
Sorry, James. After you.
We talk about a break-even point in our business. So you need to turn over X before you even start making a profit. So I'm sure you know what a break-even point is. But in terms of times within a week, for us that can be as late on a trading week as 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon before we're actually into profit in normal life.
Yeah. Losing the covers is big, isn't it?
And if we can't do our 400 or 500 meals on a Sunday and we're doing 200 or 300, then very quickly you can be treading water or going backwards in our pub. You work all week for everybody else, and hopefully Sunday evenings you profit.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that I think last week we sent out a letter which included an action card for what to do if you do become aware of an outbreak relating to your setting. But I thought it might just be helpful to run through that very quickly, and to also let people know, and again we did put this in the letter, but I think just reminding people, if you become aware of a single case that relates to your premises, whether that being a staff or if you hear about a customer, then you can always get in touch with us. The best way to do that is to use contact.tracing at stockport.gov.uk, because we will happily work with you on a risk assessment even around a single case, because we want to act quickly and promptly on these things and be really proactive in these ways. So whilst the action card that you'll have received talks about contacting Public Health England if you're aware of 2 or more cases, certainly do that. But if you're concerned, or if you do know about even a single case, then please get in touch and we'll work through that together. As I said earlier, it's about being swift and looking to minimise these situations as much as possible for everybody's benefit, for the business and for public health. So really welcome, working together in that way. Thanks.
Okay, no, that's great.
First point, obviously Ian was talking about the track and trace. Obviously, I say the majority of our guests have been great, but the odd ones who will come in and try and say, oh, this optional, I don't have to do that. I'm very clear about it. You either fill it out or you don't get served. That's it, don't they? Because I'm more concerned about the safety of me, my team, my guests, my family, everybody. And I just, I'm very black and white with it. If they don't want to do it, and I get everybody who comes in to fill out the details, not just one person, I go above and beyond, because this is quite serious. And the faster we can nip it in the bud, the way I see it, is the better. So if a single person out of the group doesn't fill it out, I refuse to serve that table, until they do it. And, it sounds a bit harsh, but it's a serious thing. I don't want anything to happen here, or anything to happen to my team or my regulars or anybody. It's serious. And some people don't take it seriously, but I let it be known very clear, for the odd time it does happen to me, that we do take it very seriously. And so most of the time they fill it out, and some of the other times they just leave, which if they refuse to fill it out, I don't really want them in anyway. And the second point is, I think it's probably more aimed at independent businesses, is that it can quite scary getting in contact with the authorities if you think you've got an outbreak because you think you're going to get in trouble. And I can absolutely guarantee you the best thing you can do is get in contact as soon as possible, and because they will work with you if you show that you're willing to work with them and you've done the right thing. And don't be scared of being caught out if you've not done everything, because they're there to advise at the end of the day. Because the last thing you want is it to escalate, and then they have to come in, and there are so many critical steps stopped. So nobody should be scared at all of getting in contact. It is the best thing. These guys are good at what they do, and they're human beings at the end of the day. They just want to protect everybody. So, don't sit in your hands and hope for the best. Sometimes it's best to get in contact.
Martin, that two very, very good points made there, and I'm sure that Ian and Jen will be very pleased to hear that you're not ogres, you're there to help.
Could not have put it better. Thank you so much, Martin. And that was the final thing I wanted to add, if I may, Helen, is just a huge thanks, because we've seen such a positive response from the businesses in Stockport through the SK Business Recovery group, but also with the venues that we've had contact with and conversations with. So huge thanks, and Martin, what an advocate. Really appreciate all of your comments, because that's such a strong message and such a welcome message. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon. And to everybody who's watching our webinar, who's viewing it, please don't be afraid to get in touch. These people are here to help you, and there's some great stories coming out of Stockport. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Excellent.